Here's a Sears Silvertone AM shortwave console radio from 1938. I just picked this up from a local thrift store. They had it sitting in there for quite a while because there were quite high price tags on it, and then they slowly reduced the price over time. And the price they had on it, I offered them less when they took it, so I took it on with me. It's missing some of the push button knobs or buttons, and then it's missing a knob, which I'll probably never find because I don't believe there's probably not too many of these radios. And the grill cloth is a little bit less to be desired, but I have seen worse. So anyway, I've been running across a lot of console radios lately. Picked up a couple of Philcos about a month or so ago, but I saw this one and I figured I'd go ahead and pick it up, see if what we could do to get it working. I did notice this on the speaker, inoperative. It says inop 10.5 of 45. Just kind of interesting, and I don't know if it's been inoperative that long or what, but somebody has cut the power cord on it, and so we'll have to see what we can do about getting a power cord, or at least an end on it. Believe it or not, the power cord is actually in not too bad a shape. It does have a couple of little splits in it, but anyway, I'm gonna see if I can't pull this chassis and see what we got inside of here. I know the dial isn't moving correctly. It turns and turns and turns and don't move, so the dial cord or dial string is slipping in there. Looks like it's got the standard broadcast band and one big shortwave band. Looks like it goes from about 6 to 18 to, well, 6. Looks like it goes from about 6 or 5 point something over to about 20 megahertz, or as they say on here, megacycles. And it looks like it's got the tuning eye on it. And when you tune in a station, that glows, and it glows more the stronger the signal is. It looks like these knobs are marked on here. That one says volume, and AM, and probably shortwave bands there. And I would imagine that this looks like the tone control. Listed only 2 positions. It's supposed to be a low and a high, but I think it just moves 2 positions. I might have gotten these reversed or something like that, but it looks like the little knob pointers are there. Well, anyway, let's see. We can't get to the fun part of trying to see if we can get the electronic part of this thing working, or see what all is wrong with it. I also wanted to mention the chassis code on this one is a 101527. But apparently this chassis was used in more than just the console. It was used in a tabletop version of this radio, so it was used in two different models that I know of, maybe possibly more than that, but the model number of this particular set here is a Silvertone 6135, and that will denote the console version. The tabletop version is a Silvertone 6125. So anyway, let's get back to pulling this thing apart and see what we find. Well, I've got the chassis pulled, and it looks like we've got some of these older dry electrolytic capacitors in here for the filter capacitors. You got a 40 at 450 volts, and then we've got a 20 at looks like 350, and then a 10 microfarad at 25 volts. And then I was noticing that this radio has been recapped quite some time ago. It looks like they used those Black Beauty capacitors, which were supposed to originally be an improvement over the regular standard paper capacitors, but in actuality I think they were worse. These were done with, it looks like sprayed black beauties is what they called them. And we got one right here. It's just split open here. Looks like it was probably the tone capacitor. Goes from the tone control over to one of the tubes, but it's split open, and those were quite common for blowing tone capacitors because there's so much voltage that goes through there and surge that a lot of times you need a higher voltage capacitor. This one's only 400 volts, and it's a 0.1. We might ought to go with something like a 6 or an 800 volt and see how that one works out. But yeah, I think the first order of business is to get this split capacitor replaced. More than likely it's probably shorted. Okay, we've got that capacitor replaced, the one that's split open. It was a 0.1 at 400 volts. I didn't even bother to check it. It's split open right there. So and as far as these filter capacitors go, I replaced them because this one was rated at 20 microfarads, reading somewhere around 47 or something like that, so over twice its marked value. And this must be a really old one because this one's only 25 volts at 10 microfarads. Yeah, that's pretty huge capacitor for that size of a voltage. But anyway, and then this one, 40 microfarad at 450 working volts DC. Yeah, it read more like 100 microfarad on my testing it. We got it hooked up just to show you what it tests. And these modern, you know, capacitance meters or whatever don't put a whole lot of voltage to them. It's supposed to be a 40 at 40 microfarad. It's reading 99.5. Yeah, that one's definitely done. So that's just an example of, you know, what all's been going on with these. And here's the 20 microfarad at 350 working volts DC. And it's reading 44.5. Yeah, that one's definitely way out of spec. More than twice its value. So yeah, the reason why I replaced those, I went ahead and this is a little tiny modern replacement for the 10 at 25 volts. I put a 10 at 35 volts. The original value, looking at the schematic, was 8 at 25 volts. The original value of the one they had this 40 in was, and originally it was a multi-section capacitor that went in here, but the original value was 33 at 150 volts, but I only had a 350 volt 33, so that's close, very close. And the original value of the one that was in this slot was the 16. I had a 16, but I only had it 450 volts. I think the original value was 175. So that should be plenty good enough. So I guess the next step would be to fasten a power cord to this thing, cause, and looking at this thing, this power cord is splitting and rotten, so it needs to be replaced. Not very uncommon for these rubber power cords of the day. Okay, we got all our filter capacitors installed as mentioned earlier, and now we have our power cord. Have us a new power cord installed, so I guess now we need to go ahead and plug it up and see what happens. I'm gonna have to put it back in the cabinet so I can install the, or hook up the speaker, because the speaker on this model has a field coil and it has a field coil in it. It's a field coil speaker, so I'm gonna have to plug it up so, you know, all the circuitry is properly hooked up and everything. So I'm gonna go ahead and hook the thing up and put it back in the cabinet and plug it up and see what happens. Okay, we have our chassis installed back in the cabinet. Well, the only thing I left off was one of these push buttons, which really ain't no need to even hook that up right now, because I'm just trying to find out if it works. But these, this radio had a missing knob and had missing about 4 of these little push button things, so push button knob covers or whatever. So anyway, let's go ahead and turn it on and see what happens. Well, we have dial lights. But it doesn't appear our tubes are lighting up. So I guess we got something going on, because there's no... Let's see if I can move these tubes around. It looks like there's the tube's lighting up in the camera, but it's not. That's just a reflection from the dial lights. Well, don't look like we have any sort of tubes lighting up, so I wonder if we have a bad transformer or a bad tube somewhere, because I was looking on the schematic on this radio, and the schematic lists these tubes as being wired in parallel, or excuse me, in series. And so in that case it'd be like a string of Christmas lights. If one of them went out, then they'd all go out. So it's very possible we either have a bad tube or a bad power transformer or something like that, because I would think we would at least get the tubes to light up, but well, I don't see anything. And I believe all these tubes are tight in the socket, because I checked them before I put it back in the radio, or the chassis back in the cabinet. Well, let me, I think I'm going to start with the simplest thing first and check the tubes. Okay, checking our 25Z6 rectifier tube. It is lit up and it's basically, yeah, it's definitely warmed up. So I think we're pretty much ready to go through with the test. I got everything set on here, so let's check and see what we got here. Oh yeah, way over there about 80% on that plate. Definitely looks fine. Looks good. No signs of a short, which is what we'd be looking for if we're talking about a tube that may not be conducting. It could be shorted. I don't see evidence of one. So let's go ahead and switch to plate number 2. Let's see if we can't get a reading on that. Oh yeah, plenty fine, plenty good. And shouldn't show a short on anything but 7. That's 3. That's supposed to do that. So it's supposed to show a short on 2 and 7, and so far it does. Well, on 2 it does. And it does show a short on 7. Everything looks good on that tube. I believe that one's good. We'll have to go to the next one. I'm going to move to the audio output tube next. Okay, checking the 25L6 output audio output tube. Calibrate our line adjustment. I don't see anything lighting up in there. No. I believe we might have found the culprit. I don't see anything in there lighting up at all. I believe we got a dead tube, and this is probably the reason. So we got voltage, but that tube is not lighting up. So I believe we probably found the problem. This tube is not conducting at all. I believe it's shorted out. It looks like it's got a burn spot on the top of it. Likely it could be shorted. Could be a lot of things. Could be shorted out, but I don't see anything even lighting up, so it could be burned out. Probably more likely just burned out. Probably was a short somewhere and likely burned out the tube. It could have been somebody tried to plug in the set with those old filter capacitors and blew the tube, or one of them could have been shorted or whatever. It ain't no telling. But I guess the first order of business is to try to locate a short and find out why the tube blew in the first place. And the second order of business is to get a new tube. So I guess we'll move on to that step next. Well, I figured I'd check the 6v6 detector tube and see what's going on with this. So let's go ahead and hit the switch and see if it lights up. Oh yeah, it is lighting up in there. But we got a filament action, so that's a good thing. Hopefully that thing will start conducting. Adjust our line voltage accordingly. Yeah, that one's about average. It's falling off a little bit. Might need to be, might be a little weak. that would still definitely receive a signal and work. And the tube is lighting up, so it's definitely probably working, but it's just not very strong. Looks like we got a weak tube. Well, that's all about, you know, when you get into repairing these old radios, you never know when you buy one, you never know what you're getting. You never know what is wrong with it, and you don't know what it's been treated like and what happened to it in the past and how long it's been run, and you know, or whatever. I mean, sometimes you buy a radio and it's got all the tubes are strong and it just needs to be recapped, and you plug it in, it works like a new one, and then sometimes you end up replacing half the radio trying to get the damn thing just to power up. So that's the way it goes. But it looks like this tube is a little weak here, so might look into replacing that tube once we get the set working. Here we have a 6U7 IF stage tube. Still got the label on it from when it was purchased at Sears in 9/13 of 1945. Let's see how this thing performs. Okay, so let's let it warm up. We do have filament action in this one. It is glowing. So we'll see how this tube conducts. I have a feeling that 6B6 tube is probably one of the originals. They must have listened the hell out of this radio just to have to replace a tube in it 5 years later. But of course, it was their only mode of or source of entertainment and news back in the day. So yeah, I believe this one's a little weak too. Yeah, this must be a pretty high hour set. Barely going up into the question mark area. It looks like other than the rectifier tube, it might pretty much have a weak set of tubes in this radio. It's barely trying to climb into the green area, but it's still only putting out a little over 50%. That's definitely kind of a weakest tube in my book. So like I said, once we get the set working, I'm not going to put no money in these tubes without the set working, but at least we kind of know where we're at here. Yeah, see, now it's climbing back up once you hold the button down for a while. So yeah, I believe that one's a little weak too. And checking the last tube, this will be the oscillator tube, and let's go ahead and see what happens. Yeah, I see it filament lighting up on it, so that's promising. We just had one shorted tube, or blown tube, that audio output tube. I back my line voltage down a little bit. We'll let it warm up a little bit. Now that one looks strong there. It's about 70%, so that's good. definitely not a problem with that one. It's not dropping off or going forward at all. That's just the way you want it. Okay, on the Sears Silvertone, we got the replacement audio output tube on it. So I'm going to go ahead and test the tube and see how this thing does. Okay, so we got a 25L6. So that looks like that's going to be 1, 12, 5, and 2, and then we're going to have 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, and 6, or excuse me, 3, 4, and 5. Go ahead and let this thing warm up a little bit. At least this one actually lights up. The old one wouldn't even light up. The filament was burned out of it. Oh yeah, that one's definitely testing good, about 75% on my meter, which this meter to me is a little stingy. So 75 is actually, 75 to 80 is almost excellent on this thing. I think the most I've ever seen this thing do is go to about 85 or so. So that was practically new old stock tube. So very, very strong tube. Definitely no problem with that. Okay, well, let's put it in the radio and see what happens. Okay, we got our tube put back in the radio. And let's see. Well, yeah, we do have tubes lighting up now. Well, yeah, they're warming up. Oh yeah, we have our eye tube lighting up here. I don't hear anything though. I have no audio. Still no audio. Something must have blown. We have our eye tube trying to move. Yeah, there it goes. It's moving whenever you hit a station. So it is receiving, but there's just no audio. So apparently we got something blown in the audio circuit somewhere. So I need to see if I can track that down. But at least we have our tubes glowing, and you know, we got a little bit further, but no audio coming out. I don't hear a single thing. There's definitely a station somewhere right around 1300 around here too, so it's picking up something, but just not putting it out. So it appears we got an audio output problem. So I think we'll have to continue this one on a little bit later on. I may do this one in parts. Go ahead and post this one up, and then as things progress, I'll update you on it. But that's what we got for now. Okay, thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll get a part 2 up on this one.